I want to do this right. Hi. My name is Johnnysegall. And for more. And I'm an alcoholic and addict. Hello. Hey, guys. Unfortunately, that's all the sign language that I know, except for one more that is the only other thing I need to know, and the only other thing I need to say tonight, which is that I love you all. I love you. Anything else I say tonight is just silliness. Somebody asked me, we were talking to some radio people or something, and they asked me why we still call ourselves addicts. And when I was working on this, I realized I call myself, a drug addict. And he says, why do you if you're not using drugs, why do you still call yourselves addicts? And why do you have convention? And I said, well, so that we won't forget. Because if we forget, we're going to go from the main ballroom of the Hyatt Hotel to the Grand Central Station lobby in about a week. Yeah. I'm very excited about being here tonight. I usually, when I talk, I try and just let go of everything and not worry about anything and just see whatever comes out. And today, because this was sort of a special occasion, I tried to take all my will back and figure everything out. And I was saying to Karen, who's my girlfriend, the lady I share my life with these days, I said to her, what should I talk about? And she says, why don't you start by telling everyone a secret? And once you do that, you can remember the truth about yourself and feel comfortable and feel connected with everybody. And what was wonderful was I told her that I didn't believe that I had any secrets that I could bring here tonight. I don't have secrets today. And then I went to my drawers and I opened the drawer and I said, baby, have you seen my lucky underwear? And oh my God. The journey to New York has been it's been exceptionally exciting for me because this is like coming home and coming home and coming home. It's first of all coming home to New York City because I was born here. I was born in New York City in Manhattan at Doctors Hospital, which for those of you that don't know is one of the few hospitals in New York City where you can order a martini in your room, which was the reason my parents picked it. And because whenever I come to a Cocaine Anonymous convention, I always get the sense that I'm coming home. I'm coming home. And this journey was, I was supposed to speak tomorrow morning. I was going to be the spiritual speaker, which really can fuck with your brain, And what happened was we were running late. We were trying to catch the plane. We were running late, as I hope not to do tonight, and I was falling apart, basically limb from limb. My knee went, and my jaw. A week ago, I was bragging to somebody that I could crack my jaw, and make this loud noise, and it never hurt. It was just something I could do to be obnoxious. And of course, I woke up the morning I was supposed to leave with this great pain in my jaw. I could barely move my mouth, and I couldn't chew on anything. So I was limping. I was teething. I was late. We were forgetting everything. We got to the plane late. We didn't have our boarding passes, so we lost our seats. I was a mess. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, I got to be spiritual. I got to be spiritual. All these voices were going on in my head through the whole trip. But I'd seen the movie before, and they did it on purpose, and it just wasn't going and all these voices were going, this insanity was going through my brain. And at the end of the flight, the stewardess walked up to us and tapped me on the shoulder, and she had a bag, and she said, "Excuse me, but we just wanted to tell you that we have voted you this was on a DC-10, big plane, our favorite passenger of the day." And I swear to God, I started to cry. I started to cry because I realized that these were just the voices. This was not how I was acting. I wasn't acting out on all this insanity. It was just going by. And I suppose I was acting out on what was in my gut, and that's what I've learned in Cocaine Anonymous. That's the essence of what I've learned in Cocaine Anonymous. I got two voices. One's up here in my head, and one's in my heart. And I suppose I was letting the heart do the walking. And I started to cry because I realized I was coming here to be with my sister who lives in New York, to be with my old good friends, to be with my fellowship, to be with people I love, and I was getting an award by the stewardesses on an American Airlines airplane, and I was just thrilled. I was exceptionally thrilled. I didn't know what I was going to do with the bottle of wine that she gave me. But I didn't care. And things once we got here started to calm down until I found out that I was going to be talking tonight I decided I didn't have to worry about anything until tonight or tomorrow. And one day at a time, I put off worrying. And so last night I made the decision. I hadn't gotten much sleep since I've been here because this is the Big Apple, right? And there's no reason to sleep here. And I decided I had to go to bed early, and I bullied my girlfriend into saying, okay, we're gonna go to sleep early, and that's, we're gonna be calm. Everything's gonna be calm, so you can be real spiritual, and everything will be cool. And we went up to the room, and it was about 11, and everything was relaxed, and she got she got sort of dressed up nice. We were gonna sort of slink off into the evening and sleep well, and she decided to set the mood by lighting some candles. And next thing I know, all I hear is bzz, bzz, the smoke detector is going off. And there's nobody coming, right? And then we blow out the candles, and all the smoke from the candles go up, and they won't come to turn it off, and so I'm ready to talk tonight, and I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank everybody from New York for welcoming me and welcoming all of us from all the other states as wonderfully as you have. This has been a great convention. I think everybody having a damn good time. Definitely beats Coppin Joints at 12 at night in Washington Square. Huh? $1 a piece used to be. Unbelievable. First meeting I ever went to was not like this. For one thing, I wasn't staying at the Hyatt Hotel. I was in the Hawthorne Community Mental Ward, and this was a number of years ago, and this was before Cocaine Anonymous existed. And I had an attitude of, I'd been working on the Johnny Siegel drug addiction program for for 10, 15 years, which was, if you get addicted to speed, the only real cure for speed, and I know you guys know this, is of course Quaaludes. And the only cure for Quaaludes is acid, and the only cure for acid is cocaine, and the only cure for cocaine is more cocaine. And and then, of course, you have to drink, take tranquilizers, muscle relaxers, and smoke a lot of weed to take the fucking edge off. So I was in Hawthorne Community Hospital, making some very nice ashtrays, when a doctor approached me and suggested that I go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I smiled. I thanked him very much, and I explained to him that I don't like groups, and that I have this plan of my own, and I'm just in here to dry out, and that I'm not going to use any more drugs or alcohol. I didn't mention that it was going to be until my next birthday, where I was going to get a bottle of Dom Perignon. It seemed reasonable. And I said, thank you very much. And he looked at me and he said, very seriously, I might add, that unless I went to this Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, he was going to stop giving me Valium. I said, oh, Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, yeah, I've heard of that program. Must be nice. Think I'll check it out. Yeah. Because unlike us, hospitals and mental wards, they believed in the Johnny Siegel method of drug addiction. You stop doing one drug, you give them another. And I liked their program. So I went to this meeting, and I had this impression of what this program must be like. I figured these 150-year-old people with these white polyester suits, white polyester shoes, and these white polyester smiles, meeting me at the door going, hi, young man, want some cookies and milk? And, and it just was like not my cup of tea. And I went down to this meeting and, in my pajamas, and... But I was looking good. And I went to this meeting, and I got as far in the back as I possibly could without being part of the plaster, and listened. And you know what? These people were having a good time. It was really nice. They were enjoying themselves. They were laughing like you guys are laughing. They were having fun. One guy was up there sharing about his wife and how he had been drunk one night and accidentally ran over her in the driveway. Yeah? And they were laughing like that. They were all laughing. I went, this is all right. Yeah? And his wife was in the front row, and she was laughing. She was limping a bit, but she was laughing. Yeah? And I thought, this is nice, this is all right. But the thing was that every few minutes, they would say the G word. The G word, God, or the imitation of G word, the higher power stuff. But they couldn't fool me. I knew what they were talking about. And I would just cringe. I would cringe every time they would say the G word. And finally, at the end of the meeting, they asked if any newcomers had any questions about anything. And I heard it a different way. I heard, are there any newcomers who have any suggestions how to improve our program? So I raised my hand. And I looked at them and I said, my name is Johnny, and I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. And they said, hi, Johnny. I said, keep it down. I said, however, I'm not a member of your particular program. I didn't want anyone to make a mistake about that. I wanted it very clear from the start. And I said to them, I just wanted to tell you, that I just want to suggest that if you would get rid of this God stuff, you'd get a lot more young people in your program. Okay? And they laughed, and they said a lot of stuff like, keep coming back. And pat me on the shoulder, and I thought, these people are just not ready to listen. So I went back to my room in the nut ward, and 2 units over, and slept very nicely that night. Thank you very much, with my Valium. The next morning, this doctor comes up to me and he says, I want you to go back to another meeting. I said, no, thank you. No. No, it's very nice, but it's not for me. And he said, if you don't go back, we're going to take away your Valium. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can only be pushed so far. And I told him where to put the Valium. And he didn't think that was a very nice way to talk to a doctor. But basically, I told him to shove it. And what I did was, in my normal fashion, was I just said, fuck you. And fuck you to all the people, and fuck you to everything. Because I was a fuck you person. And I got a basketball, and I went outside in the courtyard area, and I started bouncing the ball. And every bounce was an I'll show them. And every shot was an I'll show them. and I was pissed, and I was angry, and they were not going to tell me how to run my life. I'd done pretty damn good up to this point. And I bounced and I bounced and I bounced. And eventually I got out of that place. I took my little moccasins with me and went home. And, I stayed sober for a little while. Although I don't remember it. I always envisioned sobriety to be what people referred to sobriety as white-knuckled sobriety. I always envisioned that sober like a judge feeling. That I'm sober. Want a drink? No, thanks, I'm sober. And that's what it was like for me. It was sober, It was, don't mess with me, I'm sober. And I had like a sober blackout for like months until a friend of mine from Randy came into town. He'd been out of town, and what Randy said was something that hadn't occurred to me, which was, Johnny, would you like a drink? And I went, oh. And I lifted my arm like we used to do, because he was my lower companion. And I was his lower companion. That's what we used to call best friends. And he came over and twisted my arm a little bit. And I went, oh, you twisted my arm. I'll have a drink. And I had a drink. And I got to tell you, after like 6 months of sober like a judge, nothing has ever felt better. I mean, going down, it felt like, I thought, why was I screwing around with this sobriety stuff all this time? I must have made a mistake. And it felt so good. And to celebrate, we had another drink. And then the drinks had some drugs. And the next thing you know, it's 2 in the morning. I'm driving home 35 miles an hour in the fast lane of the Santa Monica Freeway so as not to attract attention. Getting arrested and going to jail. And what I remember from that experience was that it was the first time I had ever experienced this feeling, which was I remember being bailed out of jail and sitting in a hallway of this house that I was renting because I had accidentally burned my house down. Could have happened to anyone. And I remember feeling that I've heard so many times in these meetings, which was that hole in the gut, that feeling of humiliation, that feeling of humiliation, because it wasn't because I got arrested. No, I'd been arrested before, I'd been in trouble before, but what it was this time I had made a decision that with all my might and all my will, I was not going to get loaded again. I was not going to do any more cocaine. I was not going to smoke any more pot. I was not going to have another drink. And all the man said was, Johnny, do you want a drink? And I realized that I was in big trouble. I'd known I was a drug addict and an alcoholic since I was 16 years old. But that day, I realized I was in big trouble. Now, that day, there was no Cocaine Anonymous for me to go to, and I had already denied everything about Alcoholics Anonymous. So all I had, once again, was me to figure this problem out. And the only answer I figured out was to get loaded and think about it. And that's what I did. I did for the next 4 years or so. What brought me to my knees eventually was nothing happening. I had things happen through my life. But, people talk about hitting a bottom. That you have to hit a bottom before you get here. Well, I understand that, but I believe that we hit many bottoms, and the idea is to get here before you hit that last bottom, which is the one you never come back from, I think that's the bottom, This is one rung up. And I got to one rung up because of that expression, being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was pooped. I was just pooped. And I ended up in what actually happened was, just to go back a few months, I was talking with Janine today. We were reminiscing old times, and what had happened was I was supposed to. Janine and I were Are my lips moving? Janine and I got married the day before I spent my honeymoon in the recovery home, is what happened. And, he's laughing, he's falling down. Hey. And we didn't know what to do. All kinds of stuff had happened. My mother had just died. We had run off to Costa Rica for a while. I'd spent the last night, we were talking about my mother, the last night I ever spent with my mother was when she came to wipe Chinese food that I had thrown at Janine off of our kitchen walls. And what happened was I'd thrown it at Janine, and Janine had left me once again. And she'd been going to Al-Anon, I think, that week. And she had just started. So she was getting smart, and I was staying loaded. And my mother had never been to Al-Anon. She was too drunk to find her way there. But she came and cleaned the stuff off the walls. And at about 2 a.m, I woke up and called her. I called her, and no one answered. And I hung up the phone again. And I had never done that, never called her in the middle of the night. And the next morning, we got a call at 10 a.m, and she had died. She had died. And she'd spent her last night cleaning up after me. And I was falling down. By this time, I was falling down on chairs, and I couldn't walk. And I was a garbage can. I would take anything. They used to call my bedstand Schwab's Pharmacy. And so everything was confused in those days, and I was lost, and I didn't know. I had finally, you see, gotten to that point that I had never been at before. And that was the point where I was ready to say, I don't know. I had gone past humiliation to, I suppose, humility. Because I didn't know. I did not know what to do. I did not know where to go. I just knew that I was lost. And that was my bottom, my final bottom. It wasn't the burning the house down. It wasn't the motorcycle accidents. It wasn't the fights. No. It wasn't the deaths. It wasn't the suicide attempts. It was just getting to the point where I was willing to say, I'm tired, and I don't know what to do, and I need help. I had never said, I need help. Never. It had never occurred to me. And so Janine and I went off to Vegas, and we got married. It was a very spiritual wedding. We kept having to pull the limousine over because Janine kept throwing up. And I walked down the aisle wearing my grandfather's tuxedo, a T-shirt, sunglasses, a red scarf, tennis shoes, and Ricky Lee Jones singing "Last Chance Texaco" was playing as we walked down the aisle. You know? The next morning, I made a decision to stop using drugs and alcohol. I made a firm decision, once again, and I knew I could do it because I'd done it 100 times. And that morning, I was going to start a new life. And I woke up, and I realized that this was the morning, and I felt good, and I felt powerful, and I felt enthusiastic, and it lasted about 35 seconds. And after 35 seconds, I just reached over to Schwab's Pharmacy here, and snorted something, took something, drank something, and I realized that I didn't know. I didn't know anymore. Janine got me into a hospital. First, I went to a doctor. I remember I wanted to go to a doctor just to make sure I was an alcoholic addict. I told him how much I drank. He says, "I just wanted your opinion on whether you think I'm an alcoholic." He says, "Yes." He says, "You want a second opinion? You're an addict too." No, I'm only kidding. I'm just kidding. I went into this hospital, and then I went to, after a week, I was too scared to go home, frankly. There was the answering machine at home. There was mail in the mailbox. There were people. There were things. There was responsibilities. There was all this stuff, all this life stuff, and I was petrified to go home. And I got a call from a guy in my union, and he said that they had a halfway house in the Valley, in California, and would I like to go there? And I hemmed and I hawed, and he was from New York, and I remember feeling good, because he talked like this. He said, "Hey, come on out to the house, it's a really good place, we got good food, no fucking around out here, And, I felt at home. I felt like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, good food. And I went out to this halfway house, and I was very nervous and very anxious about being there. There were like 10 guys, strangers. There was this guy, and he was like there, he pointed his finger in my face, telling me, "You're going to die if you don't stick around here. You're going to do this," And I'm going, "Oh, my God, I'm going to dick this guy." But I stayed. The other guys, they came up to me, and they put their arms around me a little bit, and they said, "Yeah, don't worry about this. He's from New York." No. And they said, "Stick around." They said, "The food's good." And so I stuck around, and I think Janine said she wasn't going to drive me home anyway, so I stuck around. It was the strangest experience of my life, because I felt like I was like away at detox camp, and they had all this stuff. All of a sudden, they had all this stuff. They told me I had to get up at like 7 in the morning. I said, "Excuse me, but didn't you hear me? I'm a drug addict. I don't get up at 7 in the morning. I go to bed at 7 in the morning." Yeah. And then I watch TV the rest of the day. Then I go in the bathroom, look at pornography, and go to sleep. Oh, you too. You girls ought to be ashamed of yourself. It's so funny. I once shared at a meeting that my first drug of choice was masturbating, and I swear, the only ones that clapped were the girls. But then I mentioned something my father taught me, which was if you use your left hand, it feels like someone else is doing it. If you're new and you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with sobriety? Write an inventory, share it with the sponsor, God, yourself, and another human being, and then you won't have to live with it or worry about it either. It will no longer run your life. Anyway, I'm in this halfway house, and these people tell me to make my bed also. I'm trying to remember my resentments of the halfway house. They wanted me to make my bed. I explained to them that the very same day in the evening, I was going to be in the same bed, and it was going to get messed up then. They also wanted me to rake the leaves. Rake the leaves. That was my chore. Rake the leaves. I took the guy outside. I pointed to the tree. I said, "See the tree? It's filled with leaves. Why don't we wait until they all fall down? I'll come back and rake them for you." These people were not interested in my philosophy. They told me I had to go to meetings. They told me I had to go to these AA meetings. It was before Cocaine Anonymous was around. And I said, okay, because you see, this time I didn't know all the answers. And I thought I wanted to be in this house because it was safe. It was a safe place, And I went to these meetings and I listened, and people were laughing, and they were sharing about stuff that I related to, and I knew that they were like me. I knew that they had experienced that feeling that I thought was my secret, my biggest secret, which was that I had this hurt in me. I had this hurt down deep inside me, this big hurt, this secret hurt that I was never going to tell anybody about and never show anybody. And I looked around the room, and I saw these smiling, laughing, loving people hugging each other and having a good time. But I knew from their shares, and I knew from what they said, that they had been there. I knew they had been there. You guys know what there is. If you're new and you don't know whether you're an addict or an alcoholic, and you know what I mean by being there, you're in the right place. Because if this was the Elks Lodge, everyone would be going, "Where? Been where?" Right? I digress. At this meeting, these people, who I felt comfortable with, I have to admit, started talking about the G word. It would just keep coming up. God this, God that, and the secret G word, higher power. And eventually, at the end of the meeting, I shared. This time, I shared. I shared. I didn't tell. And what I shared was that I was afraid because I saw what you guys had, and I wanted it, and I wanted it badly. But I explained to you that I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in a higher power. I had nothing. I believed in me. I believed in pulling myself up by the bootstraps, and I believed that no longer worked, and that I was in big trouble. I believed that I was going to die. And what they did was they came up to me afterwards. They didn't laugh at me. They didn't judge me. They came up afterwards, and they patted me on the back. They didn't hug me too much because they knew I was scared. And they told me, they said, one lady said, "Johnny, do you have an open mind about spiritual matters?" And I said, "No." I said, "I don't." And that was strange for me to be that honest with her. That was me being honest. And she says, "Well, if you can develop one, you can make this program." She says, "Because that's all you have to have around here is an open mind. Because you don't have to come in here walking on water. You just have to have an open mind and show up and to keep coming back." And I thought about it. And she said, "Have you had any spiritual experiences in your life?" And I started to think, what spiritual experiences had I had? She said, something that simulated a spiritual experience. And I thought that the only time that I thought of a couple things. I thought of when I was a little kid, and I had when you first I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. You guys ever been to Teaneck? Cross the George Washington Bridge, turn left. And I was my first 14 years was in Teaneck, New Jersey, and I remember just before I left Teaneck, I was like 13, 14, and I fell in love with a girl from Bergenfield, I think. And so it was like a bi-state, bi-county romance, and I was just crazy about her. I was way too afraid to tell her, though. I was very shy, and yet I somehow got connected up with her to walk her home after some party. And I walked her home to Bergenfield, which was several blocks away from Teaneck, so it was like a big deal. And my heart was racing the whole time. It was like my first love. And when I got to her place, I was like saying goodbye, and I was falling over my feet and all that stuff. And finally, at the last minute, I sort of reached out and kissed her. Gave her, I probably, hit her in the eye or something, but I kissed her, and she kissed me back. And then she ran into her house. And I'm thinking about this in this halfway house, and I'm realizing that when I kissed her, I felt so much love. I did, I did one of those things running down the street where you click your heels up, like in the commercials, because I had this feeling that for the first time I was connected to something. I was connected to everything. I felt unconditional love. I felt like everything was possible in the world. I felt like that everything was going to happen and everything was going to blossom and bloom in my life. And that's how I felt that day, But it passed. It passed. And I was thinking of more things. I was thinking, what else felt spiritual? And I remembered the first time I ever took LSD. Anyone here ever take LSD? It's illegal. Oh, and it ought to be. First time I ever took LSD, I had been drinking some Valley High wine. Drank a gallon of Valley High wine. I was a connoisseur. Emphasis on the word sewer. And we drank like a gallon of this stuff. How we didn't puke is a miracle. And probably puked and drank it again. Who knows? And a guy came by who was who we thought he was a real hotshot. He was a dealer, He was the first guy I ever met who had his own Porsche and his own briefcase. And he came in with a briefcase full of 50,000 hits of acid. And he opened up this brief, and there was all this acid. And he said, would you guys like to try a hit? He says, no one's tried this batch yet. And I felt privileged. So I took one and stuck it under my tongue. And I got to tell you, 10 minutes later, nothing was happening. And I was very, very, very disappointed. And I thought, no wonder they're so small. So we took another one. About 15 minutes later, my hand grew bigger than my whole body. And started to rock with the music. We were listening to Abbey Road had just come out. The Beatles' Abbey Road had just come out on tape, reel-to-reel tape, and pre-CD, pre-tape, pre-cassette. And we were listening to it, and my hand grew bigger, and my friend Randy, his body like cut in half, and both sides were dancing in different. And I'll never forget, the last thing I remember saying was, why have we been fucking around with marijuana all this time? You know? Unfortunately, what happened was about 15 minutes later, the tape broke, and it just started going, shushum, 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 shushum. And every time it went, shushum, I got higher and higher and higher and higher, until all of a sudden, all I heard was snap. And next thing I knew, Randy, who was coming over to me going, Johnny, you've got to quiet down. My parents are in the next room, had turned into a monster and was going to kill me. And he was right on top of me when I punched him right in the face. Ran down Kenter Boulevard, throwing off all my clothes, of course. Trying to get to the intersection of Sunset and Kenter because I had figured, a lot of you might not know this, that particular intersection, in the middle of that intersection, is the center of the universe. And if I could only get to the center of the universe and bring a geometric figure in my mind down to a point, I would come down. I got news for you, it doesn't work. So I did the next best thing, jump on the windshield of a moving car. Some guy that was driving by saw this, and I think he recognized the symptoms. He had most likely been there. And he put his arm around me and he started walking me back and forth. And I remember coming down. And I remember the feeling, it was the first time I'd ever experienced the feeling of gratitude. Because I had been so insane, and it was so painful to be that insane. I was even more insane than I normally was, you know? And that this guy was talking to me, and I remember picking up a leaf, put his coat around me, and I picked up a leaf, and I felt so grateful. And I remember ripping open the leaf and looking at it real close, like if you've been bathing for like 6 days. How you look at things real close. For one thing, you can't see real far. So you might as well look real close. And I'm looking real close, and I realized that this leaf was alive. And it was alive. It's like you miss things when you're not grateful. The whole world goes by. And you never see it. You never get to live in it. You know, my life before I came to this program was a movie. You know, I was just in the 5th row watching it. You know, and all of a sudden I was looking real close at life. And I realized that this thing was alive. And that somehow I was connected to it, you know? And somehow I was connected to everything. That was the feeling I got that morning. And years later, sitting in this halfway house, I thought about that. I thought about that feeling. And I wondered if that was what they were talking about spirituality. That feeling of somehow being connected to something bigger than yourself. And I thought a lot about that. And I went for a walk. Like I said, they made us get up at 7 in the morning to go for a walk. We looked like the local bowling team walking through this, go out for a jog, right? You know, and on this walk, I made a decision. I didn't even know you could do this. I didn't know you could make a decision to change your mind. It had never occurred to me. And I stopped and I made a decision to have an open mind about spiritual matters. I made a decision. That day I went back to the halfway house after the walk, and I started to feel a little better. You know, it was scary. It was scary for me. I remember looking in the mirror. It was the first time I'd looked in the mirror, and I had a big beard, and I was very heavy because I'd been eating and drinking rum and coke from Costa Rica when we were there, and I was very heavy, and I was very puffy, and I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, my God, how did it come this far? How did it get this far? I, it was as though I was just 14 years old in Teaneck, New Jersey, you know? And all of a sudden it was years later. And I was in this bathroom looking in the mirror going, what? Where am I? How did this happen? I went to the meeting that day. And I was very nervous. I was always very nervous in the meetings because I felt like there was this glass box around me. And I felt like it was like me surrounded by this glass, you know, and you guys were all together. You guys were all part of the same thing. And your voices would echo through this glass. And I was separate from once again. And I was walking outside this meeting and I looked down the walkway and there was this guy walking up the walkway. And he was like looking around and like real nervous, sweating like a pig. And I walked up to him and I said, excuse me, but are you looking for the meeting? And he jumped like about 6 feet and said, yeah. He said, how did you know? Yeah. And he didn't laugh, nothing, you know? And I thought, freebaser, right? And I took him into the meeting. I said, come here, I'll show you what the story is, you know? And I took him in there and I showed him where the coffee was because he looked like he could use a cup. And I told him it was free because how do you know, right? How do you know when you knew? And I told him the cookies are free. Take some cookies. He wasn't real hungry. And then I showed him the literature, and I explained that the soft literature was for free, and that we could like take a bunch, you know. But the hard stuff they apparently wanted to sell. I said, but you know, if you want, I'll make some noise over here. You steal one. I said, I was new. I'd only been around a few days. And then I told him, I said, the meeting's about to start. And I said, why don't you come over and sit next? You can sit over here in the back with me. And the meeting started, you know, and they started reading that chapter 5 stuff again. Always reading chapter 5. Could never figure that one out. And the meeting started, you know, and something was different. Something was different. And what was different was, all of a sudden, it didn't feel like it was me surrounded by glass and you guys separate from. All of a sudden, I got the feeling of us and him. I stuck around that halfway house for a little bit longer. And for those of you that are new, for whatever it's worth, I believe to this day that I learned everything I need to know about Cocaine Anonymous and the program of Cocaine Anonymous in those first few weeks of sobriety. You know, all the information I needed to know to have a wonderful, happy, joyous life was given to me as a gift, handed to me by strangers. You know, however, I was unwilling to unwrap the gift. You know, they talked about 12 steps, and I thought that the 12 steps was something you do when you get your shit together. Because I thought I was here to get my shit together and to get what's mine, you know? And I was given this gift and I didn't open it up, you know? But I kept going to meetings, you see? And I started to learn a little bit. And eventually I started to work a few of the steps. I worked the first 3 steps, you know? And I felt good, you know? I admitted that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol and my life had become unmanageable. I made a decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of this power. I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I admitted I was insane. I had no problem with that. You know? But that's where I stopped, you know? When I got to that 3rd step, things did start to change for me. I would be in the middle of a fight with Janine. And I'd be, you know, I remember this one time where I was like screaming. I was screaming at the time. She was yelling at me, and I was screaming. I was pointing my finger. I was very big on the finger pointing stuff, you know. You don't know nothing. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the fight, I went. You know what? You're right, and I'm wrong. And it scared the hell out of me. I turned around, like to see who said that, you know, because that was not me, you know. And I learned something that day. And I think that was the first thing I ever experienced as being the program working in my life. And then a little bit later, I was sober about a month, and I got in a fight with Janine, and I I was angry, and it was late, and it was like midnight, and I started to point my finger again. And what I started to do was to let her know that she was in big trouble, because in 5 minutes, I'm leaving the house. I'm out of here, you know? And she didn't say nothing. She'd been working a program. It was midnight. I hadn't been going out at midnight when I was sober. So I announced 2 minutes later that in 3 minutes, I'm out of here. I'm history. I'm leaving. She didn't say anything. Then 1 minute, I'm at it. Not a peep. Eventually, my time was up. I had to leave. I didn't know where to go. I thought, where am I going to go? I can't do drugs. I can't drink. And I got in the car and I started to drive. And I remember thinking, well, there's a bar down on Pacific Coast Highway at the beach near in Pacific Palisades near Santa Monica and Malibu. And I thought, I'll go down there for a cup of coffee. Then I went a little further, and I realized a voice went on. I'd never had this voice come to me. This voice said, Johnny, you're not going for a cup of coffee. You're going for a drink. And I kept driving. And I got a little further, and I heard this voice say, Johnny, you're not going for a drink. You're going to get drunk. You're going to get loaded. And I kept driving, and I parked in front of this bar, and I just broke out in sweats. But you see, I didn't know what to do. I hadn't been reaching out to you guys. I've been going to meetings. I hadn't been working the steps. I didn't have a program. I was a fan. I've come to learn that there are fans and there are players in this program. And I was a fan. I was one of those guys sitting in the back of the room, with their arms folded and a don't fuck with me look on my face. Would always walk out of the meetings after you guys stayed away from me and go, see, they don't care. I was a fan. And all of a sudden I took like a deep breath and I turned the car around and I drove straight home. And I got home sweating, anxiety filled, and I walked in and looked on the couch and there was Janine sleeping. She was sleeping. All this was going on and she was sleeping. I couldn't believe it. So I did the only mature thing an addict could do. I went into my room, I got a sound effects record, I put it on the record player, and blasted it through the house. Machine guns, bombs going off, all this stuff, right? Just wanted to get her attention. And I sat behind my desk, my arms folded, and she came in, and I started pointing at her again. And I started going, I don't remember what the hell the fight was about. I said, but there's one thing I want you to know, and that is that I'm never, ever going to forgive you for not trying to help me. I said, you knew I was in pain. You knew I was having a hard time because I wanted to get loaded. I said, you didn't do a damn thing to stop me or to help me. She smiled at me. And she said, Johnny, I'm really glad you brought this up. He says, because there's one thing I have to let you know, and that is that I'm never going to do anything to keep you from getting loaded. And instead of getting angry at her, I felt the weight of the world fall off my shoulders, because it was the first time I ever realized that if I was going to stay clean and sober, that I had to find it from within me. I could no longer manipulate. I could no longer bully. I could no longer figure my way into sobriety. I'd done that through my whole life. And I couldn't do it with this one thing, this sobriety thing. I couldn't bullshit my way into this room. I stayed sober for about 2 more months. Still didn't work the steps and got loaded. Stayed sober for another few months, did the same. Stayed a fan for another few months, did the same. The only thing different that happened the last time I came back was that chapter 5 stuff? I read that. I used to hate chapter 5. I'd sit there and I'd go, why do they read chapter 5 at every goddamn meeting? Chapter 5, chapter 5, chapter 5. I said, what's wrong with chapter 8? Chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 5. After the last time I slipped and came back, I realized why they read chapter 5 at every single meeting. And I realized it was because so that one day I would listen to it. I heard them say that half measures would avail me nothing. And it had. I heard them say that if you want what we have, and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And I made a decision to be willing to go to any length that day. You know? And they said that the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And I was willing to let go absolutely, to the best of my ability. And I started to work the steps. And I started to read the book. And I started to ask for help. And I started to move up in the room. And wondrous things started to happen. First thing that happened was I had sold a house to a man, and all my money was invested in this house. And all my money was invested in this house at the time. And the man called me up and said, I can no longer pay you for this house that I purchased from you. And I began to panic. You know, fear of financial insecurity. And I began to freak out. But then I remembered this program. And I started to work it. And I said, okay, I have to do the footwork. And I realized I had to call a lawyer and do all this legal stuff that I was never crazy about. And I called the lawyer and I made an appointment and I felt almost like a grown-up. And started to go about this. And I thought, on the way to the lawyer, I'm going to drive by the house to make sure the house is in good condition. I drove by the house, and all that was there was a fireplace. The man had torn the house down. He forgot to mention it to me. And I went insane. And all I could see was red. And I'm driving through Topanga Canyon on a beautiful California day after the lawyer tells me there's not much, something about you can't get blood from a stone or something. And that was all that was left, was a stone fireplace. And I realized I was going to use. Because I realized I had tied myself up into what I had. You know? And my career wasn't doing well. And I had tied myself up into what I was for my job. You know? What I did was what I was. And what I had was what I was. And I started remembering what I'd read in the book. And what I'd heard from you guys. And you guys said that all I had to have was an open mind and faith. And I'm screaming. I'm in the car and I'm screaming at God. And I finally, I said, take it. You want it? Take it. Whatever you want, take it. I said, I don't want to live that way anymore. I want to be alive. I want a shot at this goddamn thing. So if it's not going to go my way, that's okay with me. You know? And I had let go absolutely for the first time. I let go. I didn't know you could do that. I started to feel better. I started to work the steps. I started to do an inventory. I kept going to meetings. Then one day I heard about something. I heard about this meeting that was going to take place in Hollywood. And I got a call from a guy. And what they were going to do was have an AA meeting where they talked about drugs. And my ears just went up because I'm a drug addict. You know, that's my thing. You know? I listen to Jimi Hendrix all the time. You know? Right. And I went to this meeting. And I'm telling you, it was exciting. This meeting was exciting. It was all these people from other programs getting together. It was an AA meeting, but we were talking about cocaine addicts. We were talking about drugs. We were talking about all kinds of self-willed stuff. And it was exciting. And at the end of the meeting, they decided to take a vote on whether or not to change this meeting into a Cocaine Anonymous meeting and to begin the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous. And at the end of the meeting, we took a vote. And they voted to keep it an AA meeting. But a bunch of us decided that if that was the story on Tuesday night, then let's check out Thursday night. And the next Thursday night, we all got together in this meeting and read the opening. You know, welcome to Cocaine Anonymous, fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. That was 6.5 years ago. It'll be 7 years next November. And there were about 20 people in the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous. I'm told that today there are approximately 50,000 members in Cocaine Anonymous. And It's unbelievable. It was the most exciting thing to happen to me because, you see, I felt at home here. I felt at home in Cocaine Anonymous. I had a home. I had service to do. I had 6 months sobriety. I was a big shot. It appealed to everything sick in me. I had all these people who were like asking me about stuff, you know? How do you work the ninth step? I said, I'll tell you tomorrow. Then I went home and got out the book and read how you work the ninth step. And I started calling people up and apologizing so that I could tell the guy the next day. Because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. You know? And I started to get real active, you know, and Ray, who read some stuff tonight, he was there, and there were a bunch of people who were there. And then it started to crop up in Connecticut with Jack and Jennifer, who had a baby in New York, and Greg, and the guys from San Francisco. It was unbelievable. It was like wildfire, you know, and we felt really connected to everything, and everything was new and fresh and exciting, as it still is tonight, you know. I mean, if you're here and you're new, you're in the infancy of Cocaine. This is the infancy of Cocaine Anonymous. We're all founders here. This is a room of founders. People have gathered to New York City, the Big Apple, the Hyatt Hotel, to be founders in Cocaine Anonymous. And it's unbelievable. And you know, and around the same time, when I was getting so active in this, Janine decided to start what is now called Koanon. Of course, the irony of that is that Koanon is a fellowship where their members learn how not to be manipulated by us. And actually, the reason Janine started it was because I suggested it to her to get her off my back because I was going to so many meetings. So it was a little manipulation to start the end of manipulation. I guess you guys don't know anything about that. Me neither. A couple weeks ago, I had my birthday. We call them birthdays. And you guys call them anniversaries? Is that right? I had my anniversary. One in Rome. For 7 years, because I had about 6 months. And no, that's a And I've just been sort of overwhelmed since then. Just so many, you see, I stopped being a fan. I had decided to become a player here. And I've been real active in this fellowship. And it has brought me love, you know? It has brought me the feeling I came to this program incapable of feeling loved. You guys could have been hugging me till my ass fell off, and I would not have felt any love. For whatever reasons, I was incapable of experiencing that. I had self-loathing. When I got to this program, like I said, I had attempted suicide, I think 4 times. Once I had eaten 45 Nembutal and been in a coma for 4 days because I knew life was never going to get any better. You know? That was then. That was then. Today is now. I have a sponsor named Howard Polens. He's a wild guy. He's the strangest guy. We have nothing at all in common. Nothing at all in common, except we love each other. We love each other. And he's taught me more, you know, in these last few years than I knew in a lifetime. He told me, he one of the first meetings I ever heard him talk at, he said that, I heard him say that when I was new, he said that success was getting what you want. And I went, yeah, that guy knows what he's talking about. He said, happiness, on the other hand, is wanting what you get. And I realized I had never been happy. I had never wanted what Johnny had. He also talked to me about my anxiety. He talked to me about the guy on the Ed Sullivan Show who spun the plates. You guys remember the Ed Sullivan Show? The guy who would get the pool sticks and he'd put the plate on the top of the pool stick and he'd spin one here and he'd twirl the stick and then he'd spin one there and he'd twirl the stick and he'd spin one here and he'd twirl the stick and he'd spin one here and he'd twirl the stick. By the time he was through, that one was like wobbling down. So we had to run over here and spin that one and spin that one and keep all the plates spinning, you know. And he was telling me about this, and I'm going, yeah, that's like my life. And he said, Johnny, did it ever occur to you to stand back and let the plates fall? You know, Howard taught me that. It had never occurred to me, no. In these 7 years, I've gone through a divorce from someone I loved, you know, and been able to stay friends and care. I mean, Janine and I spoke at the first Cocaine Anonymous World Service Convention in Santa Barbara on relationships while we were going through our divorce. That was interesting. You know, I've been living with a girl on the program, Karen, for the last 3 years, and all the things that Janine and I were learning about. We talked today. She's been able to put that into her relationship with her friend Simon, her fiance Simon, and I've been able to hopefully attempt to put into mine with Karen, and you know, because the truth is, all those things, everything is possible. Sometimes we get glib about stuff, I think, in the fellowship. Sometimes, you know, I find people going, you know, this is a selfish program. This is not a selfish program. This is not a selfish program. The only thing I ever quote from the book is that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problems. That's our problem. That's not the program. The program is about giving unconditionally. I had a friend, Frank, who used to tell me to give and give and give until you can't give anymore, and then give some more. You know, that's what Frank used to tell me. Not a selfish program. And we went to a meeting and on relationships, and the guy said, you know, are there any people here that really believe they have a healthy relationship? And out of like hundreds of people in the room, 2 hands go up out of the whole room. That was me and Karen. You know, but that's not the truth either. I mean, how many of you in this room have a healthy relationship with a higher power? That's a lot. That's a lot. How many of you had it before? Yeah. Back to Grand Central Station lobby. I have the opportunity to have my sister here tonight, which means more than I can tell you guys. More than I can tell you. My sister and I, who hardly spoke for a number of years before I got sober, and who was the first one I went after when I got sober. I talk about a program of promotion. I grabbed my sister when I got sober and said, "Hey, I got this great program for you," and I dragged her off to this meeting. You know, I was not going to track. I was going to promote. I was going to stuff her into sobriety, and it didn't. I took her to the Kaufman and Broad meeting, and there are a bunch of you that were at that meeting, and the Kaufman and Broad meeting was the first daytime Cocaine Anonymous meeting in existence. And for whatever it's worth, we found a couple years ago. We found a phone list of the members of the Kaufman and Broad group, the like original 30 members of Kaufman and Broad from Cocaine Anonymous, and that was like 5-6 years ago. And out of the 30 original members that would participate in that first Cocaine Anonymous meeting, 28 are still sober today. And one of them is my sister Cindy, who fortunately didn't let me push her too far away. I don't know what more to say. I'm very happy to be here. I'm filled with love and compassion for all of you. Everyone has been really kind. I was not supposed to be the speaker this evening, and I didn't hear one crack to my face about it. And I appreciate that. I guess I just want to close by telling you the last thing that I learned in the halfway house. When I was in this halfway house, after the day when I took the walk, and after the day when I met that guy and showed him where the seat was, and after the day where I told him he could steal the big book, I went to bed. And I felt excited. I felt enthusiasm. You know, enthusiasm is a word. You know, the spirit of Cocaine Anonymous. There is a spirit here. There's no doubt about that. One of the nicest, I do digress, one of the nicest things thing I'm most proud of in the years of participating in Cocaine Anonymous. Ray told me this the other day because, frankly, I was like had sober blackouts in the beginning. But he said it was my job to pick the names on the chip when we made the original Cocaine Anonymous chip. And apparently, I was the name picker on the chip thing. And that hope, faith, and courage, which means a lot to me. Now, for whatever it's worth, a lot of you might not know this little story, old story, which was that originally it was not going to be hope, faith, and courage. It was going to be hope, faith, and willingness. Those were the original 3 words for the CA chip. But willingness had too many letters. And that's the truth. But when I was in this halfway house, I had no hope and I had very little faith. But I had a bit of courage, which I later learned was some blind faith. And I was lying in bed, and I was enthusiastic. My sponsor's always telling me to be enthusiastic, saying, "Johnny, be enthusiastic." And he always tells me that when I feel like climbing under the house or something. And I finally got mad. I said, what's all this enthusiasm? Isn't that self-will? Isn't that, faking it? And he said, why don't you look it up in the dictionary? I looked up enthusiasm in the dictionary, and one of the definitions said, "And in enthusiasm, God, in God." And so when he tells me to be enthusiastic now, it's much easier. I'm in this halfway house, and I'm being enthusiastic for the first time in 15 years, probably. And I'm talking to my roommate, and we're talking about all the things we'd learned and heard at this meeting, because they were all new and fresh and exciting. And then he went to bed, and I lied in bed, and I was thinking about that letting go stuff that everybody was talking about. And I was thinking about that surrender stuff that everybody was talking about. Surrender. And for me, if you surrender, then you get stabbed in the back. And it was like, what is this surrender stuff? And I was like thinking about it. I guess I realized I was praying about it. I just didn't know it. And what came to mind was when we were in Costa Rica. And we were sitting on the balcony of this house just after my mother had died. We went to Costa Rica. I didn't even know where it was. I still don't really know where it is. It was just like a place to go to hide for a while. And we were on the balcony of this man's house, overlooking the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen in your life. It was this jungle with giant iguanas and monkeys jumping around and sloths. And at the bottom of this jungle was this beautiful bay, this gorgeous bay. And on one side of the bay it was dark, on the other side it was light. And I said to the man who owned the house, I said, "What's that dark part in the bay?" And he said, "Oh, that's so unfortunate." I said, such a waste. And I said, "What do you mean it's unfortunate? What do you mean it's a waste?" He says, "Well, every year at least 4 people drown there." I said, "Really?" He says, "It's so unnecessary." I said, "Why do you say it's unnecessary?" He says, "Well, the truth of the matter is," he says, "that dark area, that's the riptides." And he says, "What happens is people go out there and they start to swim, and they're just casually swimming, and the riptides grab them, and they start to pull them down and out, and down and out. And they're really powerful there," he said. And he says, "And what the people do is they panic, and they start to swim. And they swim, and they swim, and they swim towards shore, and they swim, and they swim, and they swim with all their power and all their muscles." And he says, "And the riptides pull them, and pull them, and pull them." And he says, "Eventually, their muscles turn to rubber, and they get sucked down, and they drown." And he says, "It's such a waste." And I said, "What do you mean it's a waste? What do you mean?" And he says, "The truth of the matter is, from up here we can see it's a dark area." He says, "The truth of the matter is if they would only let go, if they'd only surrender to the water would pull them down, sure, and they get some water up their nose, and they get twirled around and bumped around a bit, but it would pull them out too, and it would pull them out beyond the dark area. And once they got beyond the dark area, all they'd have to do is swim along the shoreline and swim in." And I sat there in that bed, and I started to cry, I think for the first time in a long time. And I realized that for my whole life, probably, I had felt as though I was being sucked under, sucked out. And then all I knew to do was to swim and to swim and to fight while I was being pulled down and fight and fight and fight. And I came to Cocaine Anonymous, and you guys said to me, Johnny, why don't you let go? Why don't you let go and trust us? Why don't you let go and show up with us? And sure, you'll get bumped around a little bit in the beginning, and sure, you'll get a little water up your nose, but eventually you're going to get beyond the dark area. And all you're going to have to do is swim around it and swim into shore. And it's really nice to be on the shore with the rest of you tonight.